Raymond Ravaglia, who is a graduate of Stanford University himself, and then he taught at his alma mater for many years and is the founder of the Stanford University Online High School and was the associate dean and director of the university's Pre-Collegiate program, which served middle and high school students. Ray has served in various advisory and board capacities regarding online education, in which he is a pioneer, and was a founding member of the International Council for Online Learning. He founded the Malone's Online Network, which is a collaboration of 15 independent, like what we call private schools, across the United States to use online technology to offer courses to their students. He was also the executive director and co-founder of Stanford University's program for gifted youth, that means exceptional students, which touched the lives of several million students over the years. Now perhaps you know why America is right in the front of all the inventions and innovations in education and across a whole range of industries. Ray has launched or piloted academic programs related to both mainstream instruction and enrichment in the US, Canada, several countries in Southeast Asia, and now also India. Specifically, Ray has supported and participated in a range of exploratory pilots in India. He advises in various capacities today, including professional development, strategic planning, and board directors' guidance with leading private schools in the United States, including Commonwealth, Boston, Phillips Academy, Andover, and others. Currently, Ray is the director of the Pre-College Division at the School of the New York Times and in Admission Capital, which is a social investment organization investing in high-impact schools of the future. Ladies and gentlemen, Raymond Ravaglia. Welcome, Ray. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming. Ray has just arrived last night, very late last night, to be with here today. We are very grateful to you. Thank you very much for coming. We look forward to your amazing insights into the future of Indian school education. Thank you very much for coming. Also with Ray is our own Shivram Venkat Subramaniam. Shivram is also very highly qualified. He's an alumnus of BITS Pilani, IIM Calcutta, and MIT Boston. That's an amazing curriculum, educational curriculum vitae. He has over 2 decades of experience spanning in India, Europe, and America as an investor, entrepreneur, and an educator. Over the past decade, his efforts have been completely focused on the education sector in various parts of the world, including India. This includes outreach efforts, pilot projects, and new product launches in collaboration with the world's best academic associations and institutions. Currently, Shivram is the promoter CEO of Looking Glass Ventures. Looking Glass Ventures is an education technology company based in Palo Alto, Silicon Valley, and it offers transformative educational programs to educators and students around the world. His organization, that's Looking Glass, works with educational publishers, academic associations, schools, colleges, and helps students in over 25 countries. Shivram is based in Palo Alto, as I said earlier. He lives there with his wife, Suchi, who's also a doctorate from Stanford in computational. Yes, she's just got a doctorate and she's very talented herself. So between Suchi himself and his older son, they have strong linkages with Harvard, Stanford, and MIT. And very important for us, Shivram has a long-standing association with EducationWorld and is our well-wisher. Thank you very much also, Shivram, for helping us coming here to give all the principals of the top schools, top-ranked schools of India, some insights into the kind of path-breaking work that you're doing in the United States, and maybe we can learn something from you, and perhaps, of course, we assure you will continue our association with you and with Raymond. Thank you very much. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we leave the floor open to Raymond and Shivram.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And let me make sure that this is working. Yes. A real pleasure to be here today. It's someone who's been involved in online education for a long time. I find myself most often these days giving presentations over the network, webinars, other sorts of video presentations, and I have my standard set of jokes that work very well in that environment. Typically, I refer to, we should wait a few minutes because I see that there are cars still circling in the parking lot, which online takes people a second and then they realize, oh yeah. In person, when I used to do these things 25 years ago when I was first starting these programs at Stanford, then it really was the cars circling in the parking lot. I've asked Shivram today to sort of serve as my foil, both to make sure that I address the points that need to be addressed, that if I step over something I need to go into in more detail, that he'll stop me and ask the questions that you have in mind but may not be ready to ask yourselves. And also, too, to ensure that adequate context is provided to take what I am speaking of in the US context and making sure that it is played out fully for the Indian context. So if he steps into the middle of anything I'm saying, he has my permission. That's why he's here. That said, he will be more the Harpo Marx character than others, except that he won't have the horn. So, things that are on the board there, if you looked at the flyer for this event, these were the topics that we want to discuss in the broadest sense. And the way that we will get there is by looking at a number of case studies, going into depth into programs that I've been involved in over the year that inform different aspects, in particular of how schools are preparing their students internationally and what can be done for schools in India to participate in the global conversation that is constantly occurring between the world's elite schools. As we sat last night looking at the challenges facing schools in India, we came up with this list of 7. And I'm going to just walk through this quickly and point out that these are not Indian-specific problems, but the same problems take place in the US in varying ways. Regulatory restrictions on fees and supplements, while in the independent school world, in the private school world, the discussion is typically on that the business model is broken, that the cost of education is going up by CPI plus 2 to 3% every year, and this is obviously not sustainable. How do we put a damper on the rising fees, or for schools that are operating in a charter school context, which are essentially privately operated schools with government funding, then they are held to very strict requirements regarding fees. Compliance with reservations, the fact that schools in India are being required increasingly to take groups of students or to reserve spots for students who are coming in through non-standard channels. In the US, the private schools have for years been trying to find such students to bring them in because there is strong social pressure that they need to be able to point to this type of diversity. So they are constantly challenged with finding ways to bring in students who might not meet the normal qualifications for admission and bring them in anyway. And then in the charter school context, schools have very little say over what the admissions criteria are. Even if they create themselves as top flight academic schools, if they are a charter school, they need to give priority to the students who live in the immediate area. And so they are also forced in this way to this sort of making space for other students. Increasing liability for management. At Stanford University, I had these problems firsthand. When we created the online high school, we thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to encourage our students, who are all coming in online, to meet up with each other in person over the weekend? And could we make space available for them? Could we take groups of students on field trips and do other things in the physical world? Could we even allow our virtual classroom to be open 24 hours so that students could meet there with each other when it was convenient for them to discuss topics? And the attorneys at the university came back with, you can't have students meeting online unsupervised, and we don't want you letting the students or encouraging them to meet in the real world. If their parents want to arrange this, that's fine. But if you're doing it as the school, you're going to incur liability. So the legal and regulatory framework strongly is opposed to obviously good pedagogical practice. And finding ways to negotiate that is important. External pressures on management, whether it is through boards of directors, through public organizations. So again, in the United States, the private schools, the head is always accountable to the board, and the board frequently has a different agenda than the head. In some cases, the board has been carefully selected to support what the head is saying. Oftentimes, someone will join the board with an idea that they need to now take the school in a different direction. There is a constant struggle there. In the public schools, it is often even worse because
in private schools, there is no government interference, right?
In private schools, the government tries to interfere as much as possible. But as long as the private schools don't take any government money, the government has very little to say. Increasingly,
that's not the case here.
Yeah.
That's not the case here.
So it's even worse here. In the public schools in the US, what will happen often is someone who decides that they're ready to enter political office decides running for the school board is the easy way to enter politics. And because they want to make a name for themselves to go for higher office, typically they can only run on fiscal mismanagement type issues. So they come in with the auditors looking for problems. Even if a school is working well, that is not going to advance their political career. So they come in and find anything they can possibly complain about and escalate it. So these issues are commonplace. Quality of the teaching workforce. The US certainly isn't Singapore or Finland. It is not a place where teaching is a highly regarded profession. People more often stumble their way into teaching than rush headfirst into it. And there is a constant need to either raise the academic content knowledge of the teachers. So those who wish to work with students often do not have the best academic qualifications. And then there are those who have high academic qualifications who cannot think of what to do with their lives. And they decide, I should teach. How hard can that be? And they have a tremendous need to have their pedagogical knowledge raised. So you have people who are stumbling into the profession when really this is a profession that requires long, slow maturation. Quality at scale. So even once you have figured out how to make it work at your school, there's a constant desire to meet the wider need. Education is something that is done well so seldom that you cannot sit on something that is working without wanting to take it somewhere else. And if the school is good, the parents begin to say, well, surely you have space for my child as well. The board may say you need to expand your enrollment, and that just exacerbates the problems of, do you have adequate teachers? Do you have adequate resources? So how do you scale? And then lastly, infrastructure, which plays on that, and real estate. So if you want to take more students, you need somewhere to put them. No school ever operates at half capacity for a long period of time and then decides we should use those empty buildings that we haven't touched for the last 20 years. It is always the case where you have more students, and by the time things are working, you're already operating at 110, 120% your capacity.
Sorry, do you have a question there? No. I thought you were raising your hand. So look, just to state the obvious, this is a freewheeling format, so feel free to raise your hand and hit us with questions as we go along. So we'll either answer it right away or ask you to hold on to it a little longer.
And so these are challenges that strike me as occurring in India, but there are challenges everywhere. As far as the talk today goes, I will say the first three questions really are questions for the politicians more than for the educators. There's nothing we're going to do here today to address those. External pressures on management from boards, if you can make everything else work, that will usually take care of itself. It's the last three things that I want to talk about. How do we address the quality of the teaching workforce? How can we scale things that are going well? And how can we use technology as a solution for problems of infrastructure, real estate, physical space? Two types of schools are going to find themselves at an event like this. Either the schools who are mature, they've been at the top of their game for a long time, everything is going well, their students are getting placed at good universities. And for these schools, the question is, what do we need to do to stay at the top? Given the constantly changing landscape of education, which are the trends and fads we need to pay attention to? Which are the things, if we ignore them, they'll go away? What do we need to do to stay at the top? For newer schools, especially schools that are operating in second or third tier cities, the question is how to become the trailblazer, how to move yourself to the top, how to ever climb higher in the rankings. What are the things that you can do to really transform your schools and in this way serve your students? Especially, how do you convince parents to send their kids to your school rather than shipping the students to boarding schools or residential schools somewhere else? The big obstacle that one often sees in a rising second tier or smaller city is the foreign corporations, the national corporations come in, the parents that are coming in with them, the first question before they accept reassignment, what will we do for the children? What are the schools available? And then they'll either decide to leave the family at home, and just the working parent comes, or they come and they send their child to boarding school or put them somewhere else. Unless you can solve the problem for consistent, good local education, it puts a damper as far as the ability of the cities to grow. And so the pressures come from the politicians and the industry leaders on the schools to really meet the need. And finding ways to do that is very important. I think that all of the problems we will be discussing today, there are combinations of services and technologies that can have a substantive impact on them. I'm not here to just talk about problems that I don't think have, I will not say things necessarily have solutions, but there are things that can be done in each case to move from the problem towards the solution, and that is what we will be talking about. It's 4 case studies that I'm going to go over, and I'll go through these in detail, but I'll just walk you quickly through what's coming. The first thing that I'll talk about is the Stanford Online High School, which I created 10 years ago, which shows how you can go from nothing to something, and not just something that exists, but something that exists and is near the top of the table. After that, I'll talk about ways that existing schools can address teacher qualification issues by bringing in external curriculum and technology products in the right way and changing the role of the teacher around those. I'll also talk in that about how this leads to new opportunities to expand as schools on a very narrow footprint. After that, I'll talk about how a group of schools sharing a mission with some trust for each other were able to come together and use the technology to significantly increase both what they were able to offer their students, but also to raise their national profile. And then finally, I'll talk about a project that I've been involved in for the last 5 months with the New York Times, which shows emerging trends from non-standard education providers who are beginning to look at ways that they can impact education. So the Stanford Online High School. So to put this in context, I started doing online education at Stanford University in 1988 with writing a first-year calculus course that was delivered on computer. We had funding from the National Science Foundation to develop a calculus course as a way to reach students in high schools that didn't have anyone who could teach calculus. Was thought a computer-based course would be a cost-effective way to make it available. When we went to test this course in 1990, we found that all of the high schools that were a convenient drive from Stanford were offering calculus, and being lazy, rather than going someplace further, we decided to look at younger students. So we selected 13 students, 7th grade, 1 7th grader, 5 8th graders, 4 9th graders, 3 10th graders. So that would be a 12-year-old, 5 13-year-olds, 4 14-year-olds, 3 15-year-olds. They all took the calculus course during that year. They took the advanced placement exam at the end of the year, 6 5s, 6 4s, and 1 3, where 5 is the top score and 3 is considered passing. In particular note, the 12-year-old and 4 of the 5 13-year-olds had scored 5. So looking at this result, we thought, with this population of exceptional students, this type of technology works quite well.
Sorry, Ray, probably best clarification. The exam that he's speaking of corresponds to the 12th class board exam here. So these were 12 and 13-year-old kids who were sort of reaching out, okay, to the equivalent of a 12th grade curriculum here.
Thank you. Looking at that, we felt what the technology did was provide the structure and the systematic expectations on the students so that they could move through the curriculum and they could be supported by a teacher who would check in on them periodically to see if they had any questions, but they would be generally allowed to move at their own pace. The following year, we expanded the curriculum down to the first year of algebra and built a sequence leading up to calculus. Over the next 4 years, we built out the entire undergraduate mathematics curriculum at Stanford and made it possible for a student The idea I had at the time was we would make it so that the brightest 10-year-olds could start with algebra, they could take calculus at 13 or 14, and by the time they were 18, they would have a bachelor's degree in mathematics, so that when they got to college, they would be ready to do serious work. What we found was that this was not what the students wanted to do. It is not the case that these students want to sit in their rooms, study by themselves, and go as far as they possibly can. Unless they are connected with their friends, unless they are part of a wider social context, in some sense, unless they can turn to someone and say, dude, check this out, look what I've learned, it is not interesting to them. And so we saw students come in, do quite well, and after a number of years, they would leave. In 2005, I decided what we really needed to do was build an online high school. And at that point, we were doing the mathematics, we had added physics, we had added English, we knew how to teach these courses. And I wanted to shift from being someone who was just offering courses and course experiences to being a complete school with our own diploma. Part of the motivation for that was these students needed to be connected socially. And I knew that if I was a complete school, I could move to a model where the students would come online twice a week in a seminar-style environment, real-time video conferencing between students and instructor, so that in some sense we would create a virtual Harkness table, if you're familiar with that Exeter model, but a virtual seminar where the students would really talk to and get to know each other, even though they were in an online course.
Ray, we have a question there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Mona. I want to talk about disobedience among students of class 12.
Say again?
Disobedience among students.
Oh, disobedience, yes.
Breaking the rules of the school. This is the prime, we have not understood how we should overcome this.
So this is disobedience within the context of the regular school?
Yeah. On this basis, management also decides to prohibit students from participating in extracurricular activities and other activities going on in school. Some penalties have to be imposed. All these accumulate, and then they are out of touch of studies and all. So how to overcome?
I mean, shifting, I think that is an interesting question, and I'm going to put that on the stack of questions to address. But I will take that later in the conversation, because I think that that's going to be a good one for discussion. And so...
That's good. So we'll come back to that later.
Yeah, and so you have to keep track of my promissory notes.
I'm sorry, Mona, you also identified the school you represent? All right, thanks.
So when we created the online high school, we took as a model that we would bring these students together in a seminar-style environment, that we would be efficient in the use of class time. Because since coming into real-time video conferencing, and we had students not just in the United States, but worldwide, it was often inconvenient for students to be there. So we thought we would meet any given class would meet twice a week for 60 to 90 minutes each time in seminar. That the instructors would be told, treat that time as sacred. That is the time for discussion and for the students to interact with each other. If you want to give a monologue, if you want to lecture the students, record that ahead of time. So flipped classroom and a blended model, synchronous and asynchronous. So record your lectures ahead of time and make the students watch those the way they would read a textbook, so that when they come to the seminar, it is a seminar. Moreover, we would record the seminars, and as a part of professional development, I would sit with you and I would watch the seminar. And if you're giving lectures, again, we can point to that. And we can say, look, you gave the lecture this year, we'll cut that piece of tape, Next year, that can be part of the asynchronous. And we can free that time up for the seminar. What we found in this is that there is plenty of time for students to cover a year's worth of curricular material in a year, moving from 5 days a week of class to 2 days a week of class, if you can be efficient in what is happening in those 2 days. Moreover, the total number of hours that students are sort of sitting there either talking or listening goes down from the footprint that the regular class day takes. So this frees up time, and now you can actually expect the students to do the reading rather than just pretending to have done the reading. You can expect students, you can give them more time to work on papers, more substantive work, and it opens up possibilities for being clever in your use of physical space. So since we were a purely online school, the only time we would see our students in person, we would invite them optional to come to Stanford for 2 weeks in the summer. So there are many universities, in fact, most universities in the United States run some sort of summer program because, and they do this not because they have any love for high school students or any mission to teach. They look at the empty dormitories and think, this is capital going to waste. We need bodies in the beds. Who would pay us to come? Those kids in high school, I bet their parents will pay. And this is what drives university summer programs. We would bring the kids in just to give them an opportunity to see each other and be around each other. So one of the things that was clear to us, and one of the things that leads into the next case study, is that if this technology, this blended flipped classroom approach, can reduce the footprint that students need to be in their desks, it opens up the opportunity for more efficient use of that classroom space. Now, if the mission of the school, or shall we say, if the social role of the school is to serve as warehouse for children during the business day, then this argument does not necessarily work because the students need to be somewhere. But if the students can be productively elsewhere, whether on the playing field, in the library, in downtown, then it does open up possibilities for more efficient use of space. If you think about a school that has, say, 6 cohorts per grade level, so that cohort coming to school, those 6 cohorts coming to school 5 days a week, that is in essence 30 that's sort of 30 instances of students sitting at a desk. If you had 10 cohorts that were coming 4 days a week, or shall we say 5 cohorts that were coming 4 days a week, and another 5 cohorts that were coming 2 days a week, you could now have 10 cohorts of students rather than 6 going through the same desk space. For half of those students, they would be there 4 days a week rather than 5. Not very noticeable. Their parents can take care of them that other day. For the other students, they would be on a low density presence, but those could be students who are living much further away from the school, who would not be willing to commute that distance 5 days a week, but who could commute that distance 2 days a week. Yes?
Good morning. I'm Sanjay Purkasa from Sanskrit Gurukul, Guwahati. I'd just like to know, what does research speak about children who are interested in online education and real-time education? What does research say about the percentage there?
So, in terms of the distribution of student preference, that's something that seems to have varied. What is certainly true is the research for years has shown no discernible difference in outcome or achievement between students who are taking courses in traditional classroom environments or who are taking courses in online environments. And there have been, for 15 years now, a large range of studies showing no discernible difference. So this type of online approach, the research shows can be effective. And the experience that we had at Stanford shows that you can deliver an education comparable to that of the best schools in the world in this type of environment. And towards that end, I'll take your question in a second. Towards that end, Business Insider, when they came out with their rankings of the top 50 private schools in the US last year, Stanford Online High School was number 6. So this is a school that did not exist 10 years earlier, now coming in above places like Phillips Andover, Phillips Exeter, and many of the established long-running brands. In February of 2014, I went up to Phillips Academy in Andover and addressed their board, which, as they told me at the time, was the first time in over 130 years that they'd had an outside speaker address the board. I showed them a videotape of the graduation from the Stanford Online High School. They watched this tape, and in the tape they interviewed the kids, they talked to the parents, and when it ended, the reaction was, these are our students. These are the same students. And the way they talk about the school, they have the same emotional bond that they have when they've come here. And how can you come to Andover? They're living in the dormitories for 4 years. For you, these students are only online. How can they have this emotional connection? And the answer is that the emotional connection is never with the institution. It is not the love of bad cafeteria food that binds the kids together. The connection is with each other. And is the environment rich enough to let that form? And so the academics can easily be done when you're looking just at the sort of passing of curricular knowledge. But you can also get the emotional bond, the habits of mind, the ways of thinking, the patterns of character that constitute the effects of a good education. These can also be delivered through the technology. And this changes the game. This opens up all manners of new possibilities for ways to reach students and bring them together to educate them. Now you had...
I have a question here. We are very much following the flipped classrooms in our school.
I'm sorry, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jyoti Gupta. I'm from Delhi Public School, Ghaziabad. And we do have flipped classrooms where the children are able to see the video lessons at home and they come back and we engage them into a discussion. Now, my experience with the flipped classrooms is that if there are 30 children in a classroom or 35 children in a classroom, all of them are not at the same level.
Yeah.
And it's at times difficult to engage them in a similar kind of discussion. There are some who haven't seen the videos at all, who try to hide behind each other.
Yeah.
There are some children who are absolutely proactive. There are some who are, neither here nor there. So I would like to know from you, because you've done a lot of research in this, how does one engage the entire class into a similar discussion? How do you ensure as a teacher that all your children are at a similar level? Because we've tried giving them the assignments, we've tried giving them, different ways, different parameters, but I've seen that, the entire class is not at the same level. That is my first question. And the second question, maybe you could take up later. All children who take up the online classes or the summer programs of the, especially the Stanford University or universities of this stature, do they get any benefit in pursuing their higher education after their high school?
So I'll answer your second question first and then your first question after. As far as the benefit goes, parents often think that, oh, if I take a summer program at Stanford, that will increase my chance of getting into Stanford. And sometimes they even think, and if I take a summer program at Stanford, that will hurt my chances of getting in other places, because that is saying I want to go to Stanford and not to Harvard. The answer is that these sorts of programs, if a student is making an effort to find them, if a student is doing well in the program, this is generating signal to the admissions officers that here is a student who is willing to take on extra work, and when they push themselves, they do well. So certainly doing a summer program and doing poorly, that doesn't send any useful signal. Doing a summer program and doing well, that does send signal. Now, where things become slightly more complicated, parent I know in Beijing, his daughter was going to Deerfield Academy, good school, boarding school, and she decided that she should spend the summer after her junior year doing a 8-week summer program at Harvard, figuring if I go to Harvard for the summer and I sit in the Harvard summer courses and I do well, that will tell every admissions officer that I'm the student capable of doing well at Harvard. Now, what the parents do not understand, but which the admissions officers know well, during the summer, the regular Harvard students go home. They have other things to do. The regular Harvard professors take their vacation, do their research, and travel. So you have a non-standard student population, non-representative, being taught by adjuncts and graduate students and non-representative faculty. Doing well in that course doesn't send a signal at all. Moreover, if you go to a good academic high school all year, and then you can think of nothing else to do in the summer, but go and do another academic program, it suggests to the universities that you're someone who has very narrow interests and poor judgment. So I explained to him, like, Ben, not only was this a bad decision, it's going to hurt her rather than help her. And so these sorts of summer programs that actually can do well for students are the ones where they're getting something very different from what they're getting at school during the year. It really needs to send sort of a message as to their interests and their willingness to go beyond to pursue things that are not otherwise available. Now, the problem of differentiated instruction and differing student ability in online. Students are remarkably good at avoiding being put into the right bucket in some sense. You will have the students who test very well, but who, when they show up to class, seem like they have never read the book before. You have the students who clearly could do the work, who don't bother. You have the students who spend a lot of time trying to do the work that they're not really prepared for. I think that, certainly what I found that works is sort of the recognition that there is going to be varied ability and varied interest, and a distinction between the sort of mandatory seminar time where everybody needs to be there, and then in some sense the optional extra. So if you're in a situation where you flip the class and you reduce the number of times the students are coming, so that the students are meeting twice a week, say, rather than 5 times a week. If you can add a third time that the students who are not doing well are required to attend, or that they can elect to attend, where it is an opportunity to sort of step back, go over some of the foundational things that might be causing problems. Or, at the same time, it may be that you have this sort of honors extra day for the students who really understand the stuff well, an opportunity to come in and explore the material from a different angle or a different perspective. You can get the differentiation happening sort of around the periphery while still preserving the essential structure. If you have sufficiently large numbers of students, then it opens up opportunities to do more ability grouping around the subjects. If you're willing to do away with age as the determining factor of which students take what courses when, so that the older student who might be further behind is sitting with some younger students, and the younger student who is doing really well may be sitting with some older students. There is often a reluctance on the part of educators to do this, I mean in the United States especially, for fear of impacting self-esteem. Yet the students know what they know, and they know what they don't know, and they know which ones are particularly smart. And they have no problem with celebrating those differences. We just feel bad because we wish we could do more to address them. Those are steps that can be taken. Moreover, if you are in a situation where you can collaborate with, so I spend a lot of time worrying about the absolute best students and how do you keep them from being bored and disruptive. Even if there are opportunities to sort of band together with other schools in your area to have a course that is at a level sufficiently high where you would never have enough students yourself to offer that course. But if you have 5 or 6 institutions working together, then you can offer that course. And I'm going to talk about exactly that in the third case study when I go to the Malone School. I'm going to take this as an opportunity to move to the sort of micro-schooling, as we call it, and external sources. So micro-schooling, just take that as...
Sorry. Let's squeeze one more question.
Yeah,
we are fighting the clock. We need
Okay, I'll speed it up.
about a 40% pickup in time.
A very short question. My name is Gagandeep from Nitya Solutions. We are using technology to help teaching in schools. I wanted to get a comment from you about the demographics of the students of Stanford Online High School. I think it's of importance to see how that compares with other normal schools. Is this a different demography?
I'm sorry, can we take that offline? Because that data is readily available, but...
yeah, so I mean, briefly on the demographics, about 25% of the students are international. So they're living outside the US. Geographic distribution in the US, maybe a third of the students are from California, and then pretty good spread throughout the rest of the United States. Almost no students from Europe. There is such no one in Europe ever wants to pay for education. So, I mean, we've written off that continent. The ability is not as high as, and this was one of the things that made my instructors very unhappy when we moved from the old programs to the online high school. When we were doing the old programs, then we were just a place for gifted kids to come and take courses in their area of absolute strength. And when you do that, you can take an attitude of, these are gifted courses, I'm going to make them really hard. And so I had instructors who had this attitude of, I set a high bar. My course is the gateway course. Those students who make it over the bar, they are truly bright students. And I'm helping them realize this. And, you know, the attitude there was, if 2/3 of the students fail, that's no problem. If they're 8th graders doing calculus, they can go back into the regular math course. we'll take the rest of the kids and we'll move them up. It's very different if a student comes and fails sophomore year. The cost of a full-time student failing a course or a year of school in an online program that's devastating. And so I needed to take these instructors and say, look, I don't care how hard you can make it. I don't care how far your best kids go. I want to see everyone succeed. Your job has to be developing the talent of the students who are coming in. You know, and so the demographics, we moved from a school that only had students, say, in the top 1 to 2% of the population as far as the subjects we were teaching them in, to something that was much more reflective of the typical elite private school, where we would have students who in some subjects could be down in the 70th, 60th, 70th percentile, but in the aggregate, we're in the upper 90 percentile. So there was no hard line, but I call it a documentary evidence approach to admission. So you need to show me enough evidence that you're going to be successful for me to be comfortable letting you in. For some students, that might be, you've qualified for some other program that has much stricter requirements. Well, you just show me that you're in that. I don't need to see another application. I had one student who, much of her application was terrible, but her essay, her writing was so beautiful. It's like, anyone who can write that well, I can fix anything else wrong with her. For some students, it's, okay, I need writing sample, I need recommendation letters from 3 people, I need you to go take standardized tests, and everything comes back, I'm still not convinced you're going to be successful. So the goal was always, we don't want false positives. We don't want students who come in and have a terrible time. We want students who come in and we can do something for. So as far as what we're calling, so external sources and microschooling, and I'm going to speed it up a little bit here. On the external sources, professional development and the quality of your teaching staff. Plenty of evidence shows really good subject matter knowledge is important. And taking somebody and really improving their subject matter knowledge, that's very hard. And that's very hard because it requires them to really want to bear down and improve their subject matter knowledge. And oftentimes they didn't go into teaching because they had really good subject matter knowledge. And if they were good at bearing down, they probably would have done something else. So the question is, how can you compensate for that? It is often easier to improve their skills as a communicator, as a motivator of students, as someone who knows when their students know or don't know something, someone who is comfortable in their own level of understanding. And towards that end, finding good external curricular sources that you can bring in and implement. And they spend a lot of time in the States these days talking about using the online technology to transform the role of the teacher. So they are no longer the sage on the stage, but now the guide on the side. Well, embrace the fact that it is easier to have good guides on the side and to sort of import the sage than it is to try to turn people into the sage. So there's a question? Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Trilok Singh Desh from Jodhpur Public School, Jammu. And my question is, we're talking about teachers, professional development of the teachers.
Yeah.
What I feel is, in India, specifically even today, the people come to teaching as a last resort.
Yeah.
Like in Finland and all, they get the best minds into the teaching. In India, we're not getting that way. As educationists, what should be our way of training them? Simply training is not going to help. How do we motivate them? And because if we're not getting that kind of a crowd, then we have to think of how can we make the guide on the side.
Yeah, so I would say that, I mean, if they are working in the profession, even if they're unhappy to be there, at some point, it does change. They move from, I'm doing this until next year, to, okay, this is my career. Once they accept that this is what they are doing, then it is much easier to get them to move from being unhappily bad at their job to being unhappily better at their job, and maybe even happily better at their job. And one of the things that I've often seen is that in elementary schools, for instance, with mathematics, tremendous phobia among teachers. They're convinced they don't know anything about it and that it's hard for them to teach it, and so they avoid it. And so their students do poorly because they don't spend any time on it in class. Now, these same people, if you look at their involvement in youth sports, so I see people who become soccer coaches. Yeah, the teachers aren't investing time. But, yeah, no, this is the answer. But the part of the point is, if you look at people, these same people, if their involvement in youth sports, there are plenty of people who are coaching sports teams who know absolutely nothing about coaching and very little about their sport, and yet they happily do it with this kind of sort of enthusiasm and self-confidence that goes a long way in motivating their players. If you can get teachers to sort of step away from the fact that they don't really understand the depth of the subject and adopt more of a coaching role, they can bring that kind of attitude. For that to happen, though, they need to be able to lean on something that can provide the explanation and the information. And often, this is where the technology is emerging now. So I would say rather than, it is a much harder thing to raise the level of the teacher's subject matter knowledge than it is to bring in sort of good exterior curriculum. And if you look in the United States right now, there are a number of trends that are sort of embracing this approach and then mixing in a lot of attention to analytics and the data collection, because these online courses can be very good at continually assessing student understanding. And so now you can get this endless stream of data coming back about who is confused about what and who knows what. And even if the teacher can't make heads or tails of this data, someone in the school can. And so maybe there is a chief learning officer or a chief data officer or someone who is looking at this stuff, digesting it, and then going back to the teacher with okay, for these students, you need to pull them aside. And maybe for these students, we're going to pull them aside and bring in the specialist to work with them. But you can change from a teacher who is feeling overwhelmed by what's going on to a teacher who, with the technology, is meeting the needs of many of the students, and for those that she's not meeting the needs of, you can bring someone else in who can. And collectively, changing, so, for instance, if you increase the size of the classes by 10%, bring in the technology, free up one person who's really good to roam around and address the trouble spots, you can get a better distribution of talent at need than you do in a traditional teaching structure. And so just being ready to bring the technology in to do what the technology is good at is important. Once you start doing this, you begin to think of school as something which has almost an operating system that enables it. And then this is what companies like Alt School, which is often written about and seldom understood, is doing, is they are providing a kind of backbone so that you can implement school where you want. But what this opens up, if you take from the online high school the type of model of technology use there, if you take this approach to technology use, this is what opens up the opportunity to build small satellite schools, feel like they are actively in a school, even if they are living far away. And if they are close enough that they can come in, 1 day a week, 2 days a week, even 2 days a month, they can have enough cultural connection to the school to really be part of what's going on. This then changes the vision for what the infrastructure required is to enable a school to emerge. And so you can think of expanding your impact without expanding your real estate portfolio quite the same way.
Well, I'm Bharat Malik. We have budget schools, and whatever problems you have said we face in our daily life, we do have the similar problems. But you mentioned about accreditation and alliance. This accreditation, will it prepare the child to compete in other exams in India, like for IIT and other things? Our basic challenge is the government also will have to approve this line of action so that it is accepted. So has it started in India, this thing, online? Is it started? Like,
thank you.
I just want to know whether this can be put into practice.
All right. So we largely view this as something that's on the cusp of beginning, okay, in India. You have a few options. If you go down the route of these overseas accreditations, then that certainly opens the gateways for admission abroad. Now, to the extent you want to, a child to kind of explore options within India, my understanding is that you can go with the NIS curriculum, which is completely above board, right? It sort of gives you all the bells and whistles and allows a child to progress through every entrance examination. Secondly, you can also, I was told that any child can appear as an independent candidate for the CBSE or any of the popular exams, right? Right, so that's frictionless, okay? And I'm glad you brought this up. So my corridor conversation with Mr. Malik was, why do you have to tap dance with the government beyond a certain point? Right? In theory, you could run your, without being a school in the government's eyes, you could achieve all your objectives. Right? And if that's a flawed argument, someone tell me why.
By the rules of the department and the fear of recognition, de-recognition, and all the blackmailing that happens.
No, you invite them to de-recognize you. Nothing changes. You have
see, in fact, what we see, if there is an opportunity, we are open to this thing because that makes you more open to work with. It gives you more time, it gives you more, and it's more easy for a child rather than getting into regulations and getting into all this situation.
Look, so implicit in this is an option that any of you can explore. It takes real estate out of the equation. It takes infrastructure out of the equation.
Yes, I just want to add to what Sir was saying. In India, the only thing is that, we need to change the mindset of the parents also. If you have a 5-day school, they'll say, why the 6 days don't they taking the fees for complete 6 days? So we have to change it slowly and gradually, though the online thing is really helping the children. In our school, we've already started with a lot of courses. Besides CBSE, the children are doing a lot of courses online, where they get the online certificates are coming for them. That is really helping them to improve upon. They're getting an edge over the others, but yet the mindset has to be changed and will take a little time.
These were parents who were so desperate for this type of solution, they didn't even care that we didn't have accreditation yet. They just wanted this. As those students graduated and start getting into good colleges, more and more parents look at this not as the institution of last resort, but as something attractive in its own right. So they come into it earlier in the adoption process, and they come into it with much higher expectations. They say, I could have gone to Andover. I went here. Surely you have a counseling staff. Surely you have this program. And so you need to anticipate the things they're going to be asking for, because if you cannot deliver them, then they will be very unhappy. And towards that end, we went from, in the first year, there was very little thought given to students outside of the academics. By the third year, we had the sort of program coordinator who was worrying about extracurricular activities. By the fifth year, we had a director of student life who was a full-time position just worrying about the outside the school activities of the students and facilitating those.
You could run a school out of a couple of apartments. You really can. It's not very far-fetched. And you can do this legitimately and above board.
So third case study, and this is one that addresses the point I was making earlier. This is about collaboration between institutions. So as I was building out the online high school, I spent a lot of time talking to a group of schools that had gotten endowment funding from the same group that had given us our initial funding. And I refer to them collectively as the Malone schools. They're actually independent schools in their own rights in 46 different states that just happen to have received money from the same foundation. Because they had all gone through the same application and award process, there was a degree of trust between the heads of school that one doesn't always see. And with that in mind, I made the proposal to them of, look, we should take the technology that I've been using at the online high school and work together so that it is not just our instructors at Stanford, so that you're not viewing us as a vendor who is selling a set of curricular services, but rather we want to be partners. We want an active collaboration. We will train your teachers on how to use this technology, and they can use it to deliver courses at your school and at the other schools. And the thinking was this. For a lot of schools, you're in a situation where you have a class for your most advanced students, say, where you have 3 or 4 kids who need this class. Sometimes this happens because you have 3 or 4 kids who are outliers, and once they're gone, you'll never worry about this need again. Other times it happens because you used to have 10 kids who needed this class every year, and you have a very good instructor, and now you're at a point where you don't have enough students to justify offering the class, and yet you have parents who are very demanding. And the question is, what do you do? Well, one of the things you can use is use the technology between the schools to, in essence, aggregate surplus need and capacity. So that if you have an instructor from school A, they can be teaching the students coming in from 5 or 6 different schools using this type of synchronous, blended, flipped classroom model. And that opens up all sorts of possibilities. So not only does it let you expand the course catalog, if you have a subject you wish you could teach but you don't have anyone who can teach it, you can now do it this way. It also establishes an ability to collaborate. It gives the students exposure to people outside of the immediate vicinity. And this is a kind of thing that, too, looks very good to universities, both as far as they're evaluating the institution, but also as far as they're evaluating the experience that the students have had in putting together their education. So this kind of collaboration is, in some sense, very low-hanging fruit that lets schools really step up and do something. Now, what I will point out is that if it had not been for Stanford coming into this as the enabling entity, it is unlikely that the collaboration would have ever happened. Because when you have schools coming together and navigating a collaboration is very difficult, because there is a lot of presumed status and dominance and who should be in charge and who's leading, etc. You really need an outsider who can come in and be immune from all of that, who exists solely and whose sort of success is in making the collaboration happen. Because as things get moving, inevitably, the institutions will want to pull the resources back to the center and not worry about this kind of collaboration. You need somebody who is positioned to enforce and preserve and keep it happening. And then once it happens, the parents become very happy about it, the board becomes happy about it, it becomes cemented into the DNA of the school and becomes a thing that sort of works its way up from being a footnote to being featured in the school profile to being a reason why people want to come to the school.
So the practical requirement here is to put rankings aside and find a way to work together.
Yeah, I'm Bijoy Sahu. I'm from Sai International School, Bhubaneswar. I have 3 simple bits of a question. First is, what is the percentage of students who are opting for online high school than brick and mortar schools in the United States? The second bit is these courses are enhancers or add-ons to the curriculum and knowledge, or they are independent high school certification programs? And third, how are you looking at, in the United States, going forward, this online high school certification is going to work?
So to answer your first, I think it is something like 20% of students are expected to take at least one online course this year. That number has been increasing rapidly. There are some states, such as Florida, that now have a requirement as for graduation that all students need to have completed at least one online course in order to graduate. So this is a technology that is really being embraced. As far as what types of courses are being offered, at Stanford we were offering the whole gamut. For the Malone School Online Network, the focus has been either enrichment courses or the most advanced courses that are sort of beyond the core academic portfolio. And that is one of the important things, is a school needs to preserve its identity. You don't want to start outsourcing the core courses. You want to see this technology initially as a way of addressing the periphery and sort of making the borders less harsh so that needs can be addressed more broadly. As you become comfortable in the relationships, more opportunities emerge. So you may have somebody who steps up and says, I really want to teach this, and in order to teach it, we're going to need to work together with other institutions. Language instruction becomes a natural type of thing where it is very expensive to maintain a large staff teaching foreign languages. And so if you can work with other institutions to make language instruction available so that needs are met, it can, that's a natural way of controlling costs. As far as the first two, what was the third part of your question?
How are you looking forward to this to develop in US, as a substitution to the brick and mortar schools?
Yeah, so largely, people who live near a brick and mortar school that they're happy with, they'll go to that school. Where the online really comes in are people who are either not close to a school or who have some other reason why it is impractical to be on the school campus 5 days a week in the normal school day. And that can be because students are engaged in other activities, because of where they live, because of health issues. We had one young woman who, her father was CEO of a tech company. She was living in the San Jose area, and she said, Dad, I want to go to this online high school. And he's like, why? You go to one of the best schools in the country. And she's like, I spend an hour every morning getting dressed. I don't want to spend my time doing that. And just sort of getting out of the social pressure. This worked out very well for her. Now she's at the London School of Economics. So students find reasons, but as the choices increase, the goal for every parent, as much of skepticism as they have, on some level they do want their children to be happy and successful. And so for convincing parents that this is a good solution is a thing that requires both convincing the child and having their friends of the parents or other people who are influencers impress upon them that this is a legitimate path. And in fact, this may be a better solution. But also, too, just 21st century technology and other things that are sort of features that schools have. Want to keep things moving.
We're down to 20 minutes.
Yeah. So School of the New York Times, this is a project that I've been working with for about 4 months. Bring this up for two reasons. One, about 5-6 years ago, the New York Times started a big effort to move into education at the university level. And they failed miserably. And they failed miserably in part because they tried to do everything inside their own organization. And when you're doing something that is a substantive change from the norm, it is very hard to maintain that while you're still doing your core business activity. And so what would happen would be resources would be allocated to their education effort, and then something would happen back in the core of the newspaper, and they'd pull those resources back. So there was a failure to deliver, and then a failure to realize the potential as it was moving. This current effort is one where the New York Times, working with an external group to create the school, the New York Times is providing the oversight of the curriculum and lending some of the editorial staff to the project, but all of the responsibility for delivering rests in the other party who is sort of at the core of the school. And so what is interesting here is you have the New York Times, the paper of record, purveyor of information, someone who has 2,000 highly educated journalists and writers, knowledge about all manners of subject, and also with very good access into industry, into practice. And that's where the power of this offering will come in, because you're taking the intersection of theory and practice. You're taking an opportunity to look at how the ideas that students study in school impact the world and to build and offer courses at that intersection. So they'll be featuring courses like sports management, courses like the art of criticism, where they can talk about both how do you research and criticize something. They can also have the critics from the newspaper come in. So a course like, an introduction to business and entrepreneurship, where they can get various early stage companies to come in and talk about, how did they put a pitch deck together? How did they decide what the capital structure should be? How did they decide whether to use debt or equity to finance things? And in each case, it's the newspaper leveraging not its talent as a journalistic hub, but rather its position in New York, which they would like to call the cultural and financial capital of the world, using its influence there to bring in people who are practitioners and expose the students to those and amplify that out. One of the things that they've done is we've assembled a symposium on college admissions, a one-day-long conversation where we'll have Dean of Admissions from Berkeley and Yale, a number of other universities, a number of other publishers of leading guides and research organizations into college admissions. This will be going on for a day in New York, but it will also be live streamed out to the world. So anybody can watch this live or they can watch it afterwards. And I think there will be increasing instances where companies that are established begin to move into education and offer students opportunities to pursue their interests in a way that is meaningful to colleges. And this goes back to the point I made earlier about summer programs. This is something that isn't just talking to faculty about how things happen. This is actually an opportunity to get with the practitioners and do things that are interesting. There will also be opportunities here for teacher certification and branded content and curriculum that can be used in classrooms. And I think that this is the start of a trend that we will see other companies and established players move into this space. It wouldn't surprise me if we see some trusted brands in the education world in India moving into this space. Yes.
I'm Rashmi from Mahavir Public School. Since you were just quoting an example that the girl who was avoiding time to dress up and she'll be wasting time for going to school. My question is, which system is going to groom better for children to face the real life situations? The online system, you have done a lot of research, or the regular schooling system? Yeah. Which is going to prepare the children to face real life situations in life?
Yeah, so towards that end, anecdote, I was at the Board of Trustees meeting at Stanford, and one of the trustees asked the provost, the way we're teaching students right now, where they're sitting in class for 50 minutes and they need to pay attention to the person lecturing. These are kids who have their iPads, they have their phones, they have their tablets. They need a completely different style of teaching. And he said, perhaps part of what the university needs to do is prepare them to sit in staff meetings in their future corporate jobs, which can feel very much like sitting there for 50 minutes listening to somebody talk without being particularly engaging. As far as preparing them for success in real life situations, giving them exposure to real life is important. Much of school, so if you think of what we're doing as schools, part of it is preparing students to enter college. Part of it is preparing them for success while in college. Part of it is preparing them for success in life. Parents are often too focused on the first one, preparing them to enter college. The number of students who getting in isn't hard. Getting in and succeeding is far harder. Getting in and falling short is disastrous. If you look at ways that students fail, it is often because they have been so narrowly focused on generating as much signal as possible that they are great material for this college without developing the sort of the deep skills and resiliency necessary to be successful when there. When you talk to people about what goes wrong, it's often as mundane as, well, they're going to need to do their own laundry. They're going to need to manage their time. They're not going to have their mother there to tell them to study. And the fact that these structures that were there driving success early disappear can become real problems. Getting real-world experience, the nice thing about a 2-week residential summer program is that it lets students go and see what it is like to suddenly live where they need to make their own decisions, or at least begin to approximate decisions about how their time is being spent and how they're being engaged in their academic pursuits without somebody heavy-handedly forcing them to do everything. If you think about students applying to US colleges, there's a lot of talk these days about fit and the importance for fit. And in particular, trying to get people to start being better consumers. The question isn't, you go to try on clothing. It's not how do you shape your body to fit the clothes. It's how do you find the clothes to fit your body. Why isn't this the way we approach universities? It should be not how do I make my child the sort of person who you will take, as to what value are you going to add to my child? Given that my child is this way, what do you have for him? And at the end of the day, the students who have the most success in their lives and in their future careers, that is much more a factor of what they got out of college than what college they got into. The value add, especially when you think that you're investing $200,000 plus in the US these days, is that the right investment to make? I mean, these are serious questions. And the brand hypnotism that comes from the Stanfords and Harvards of the world is such that people forget to be critical consumers. And the universities are very good at, these universities are good at not just taking a lot of money from you for 4 years. They're very good at taking a lot of money from you for the rest of your career. If you look at the size of their endowments and the alumni contributions, these are deep connections. But for value, a place like Stanford is a research university. Its mission is not to educate students or produce graduates or world leaders. Its mission is to produce generalizable knowledge. So if your goal as a student is to be part of that apparatus, then perhaps this is the best university for you. If your goal is to be educated, then perhaps go to a university or a college whose mission is to educate students. Getting this impressed upon parents is important. Getting universities to understand this in terms of, like, what is it that we, how do our students go? It should not just be where are they getting in, but also their success on getting out from those institutions. Though I never see a school publish in their profile results of graduation success from universities attended.
I have a little question.
Yeah.
I have a little apprehension. See, basically this program seems to be very good for self-driven students, that allows them to grow at their pace. But then I must also tell you that, the success of any good school depends on the personal touch, the regular motivation, the timely intervention that we give to the students in terms of the emotional bonding, group dynamics, and the performance with their teammates, social skills, etc. Now what happens is the self-driven students are very few in number, and they generally don't require us. So that's okay for them. But what about the major chunk, which is the mediocre students, the group that may get left out because of this online course, because there's nobody to continuously motivate them, intervene and give them their feedbacks, and then, that personal touch that might bring them up. So don't you think that will result in too many mediocre students withdrawing themselves or resulting in dropouts?
The question is certainly good, but I would say for the mediocre student,
children are generally playful.
Yeah.
The seriousness comes only with the age.
Yeah.
So given a choice, they would rather, children are generally playful, and the seriousness dawns only with the age.
Yeah.
Given a choice, they would love to go and play rather than sit and, study. So you need to, have a discipline, have a schedule for them, and then drive them to learn, intervene,
Right.
and then, tell them what's good.
I mean, so you need those higher executive functions to drive them to learn. But then, too, can you make the curriculum more engaging? Can you make it something that seems, relevance and engagement. If things are relevant and engaging, the students will choose to do it. If it seems that they're only having to do this because the teacher is punishing them the same way that she was punished when she was young, that becomes less compelling. When you look at the trends that are going on, and that's what brings us to this slide, so the success that, making things, so these are all ways to try to make things more engaging. Let's move away from rote learning and move to inquiry-based learning. Can we be problem-based in our instruction? Can we gamify the instruction? Can we find ways of sort of realizing that manufacturing and making things has significant value, not just for the end product, but for the cognitive development that goes on in there? All of these are trends that are being embraced in schools right now. And the question is making sure that, for these things, you need to either be doing them or to, in some sense, have a reason why you're not doing them. They need to be things that you're conscious of. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm Anurekha from DPS Numaligarh. My question is about you, sir. You'd perhaps be able to tell us, because you have the online, Stanford online school. Yeah. I'm interested to know where your students are now and where are they placed? Are they advantageously placed? You would be the best person to tell us.
So
it's been quite some time that you started
Right, so
the
Stanford
school.
Online High School through, I think we've had north of 100 graduates by now, 120 graduates maybe. The students have, 100% have gone on to university. About 12% have gone to Stanford, which people continue to want to go to Stanford. We've had students into all of the top schools, and they consistently get into good schools. We've had one student who became a Peter Thiel Fellow, so he took his $100,000 not to go to school for 2 years. One of the students, the student I mentioned earlier, who was a beautiful writer, I see her on LinkedIn. She's working for a newspaper now. I know we have at least one student who's become a pharmacist. She left college and decided that she really just wanted to become a pharmacist. And so she's a pharmacist, and she married one of the other students who's in graduate school. Those students are going on, and they're being successful where they go. We've done a lot of polling of them in terms of, how did you feel? Were you prepared when you got to university? Was it a shock when you went from taking courses online to once again having to be in a traditional environment? What they have found, and this is really sort of astonishing, they have a much easier time approaching their professors, going to office hours, asking for help when they need it. Because when you're online, part of being successful there really is learning to ask questions and to ask for help when you need it. But also, too, it might be scary if you're sitting in class and you're 15 and the teacher is looming large and the teacher has a PhD from the place you dream of going. But when you're all just small video windows, it's much easier to be disrespectful to ask questions, to be less formal. And so when they got to university, they just assumed everybody was like that. They assumed the professors were approachable. And most professors at top schools are happy when the students actually come and talk to them. I mean, the great sadness is that you're intimidating and not approachable. And so these students wander in, and they did this, which had significant positive impact. So you would think that the students coming out of the online school would have worse social skills. Instead, they value the social much more highly. And that's the thing. When you're in an online environment, you don't waste your social opportunities. Those are rare and precious, and you learn to value them. When you're in a regular school where there is so much social opportunity happening, people are happy to sort of burn them. In the online school, there were very few sort of student rivalries or student enmities of the kind that often sort of are visible at traditional schools. And again, it was just the sense of, it's too scarce and precious. You don't want to make enemies. Let's make friends.
So after listening to you for the last 1 hour and 50 minutes,
yeah,
I'm getting to know that the online schools, what I feel is going to be a better option, because I find in the regular schools, in the traditional schools, the teachers themselves start stamping the children, he's good, he's mediocre, he's this, he's that, Whereas when we talk about inclusive classroom, everybody has to be given the pace. Everybody has to be, everybody's interest has to be recognized.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel on the online classes, the children will be going for online for the subjects where they have the area of interest is there. In the school, they're forced to study all the subjects, irrespective of whether they have the interest or not. If 5 subjects are there, they don't have any aptitude for maths, they have to do it till class 10th. So,
yeah,
is there any option in the online that they can go only for the games, sports, music, or the area of their interest?
Yeah, I mean, so at the Stanford Online High School, we'd set up options so that students could be full-time, or they could be half-time, or they could come for a specific course. And that was just, the goal is to be part of a solution rather than to be the only part of the solution. And so we were always happy to find collaborative relationships and work with other institutions the students were going to. And then as far as the students themselves, there's a balance to be struck between demanding that everybody have 4 years of this and 4 years of that and blah, 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 and what students are actually interested in. And the general approach we had was, if you want to be released from a requirement, give me the reason. If it's because I don't like to do that, that's not a good reason. If it's because I don't like to do that and I want to go deeper in this subject, it's like, okay, take on, if you want to do another year of English at an even more advanced level, maybe I'll let you off a year of mathematics. And when you go to college, this is a story you can tell them, but at least there's a coherent reason for why you differ from everyone else. The goal isn't to produce an endless set of carbon copies. The students are different. Recognize the difference, work to develop the talents, and just make sure that you're not waiving requirements to make their life easy. You're waiving requirements to make their lives more interesting.
Philip, you're going to run about 10 minutes over there. Is that okay? Sure.
I won't charge you extra.
Sir, namaskaram, sir. We are from Telangana, rural India. We found one problem in our schools. Girls are very enthusiastic towards education, but at the same time, boys are neglecting their studies. Even though we motivated them, if we are not putting their efforts towards education, is there any solution?
Yeah, I mean, that's a...
I'm sorry, what is it? The girls want to study and the boys don't?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's one of those...
So, maybe you shouldn't try to fix it,
Yeah, this is sort of one of the things that's been part of the changing climate of online is sort of in the earliest online courses where there wasn't this sort of persistent video communication, then there was a great anonymity. So the boys that, I mean, this is sort of the big problem that happens in school, is that students are very good at meeting the social expectations of their peers. And even if you're interested in the subject, if it's not cool to be interested in the subject, then you will pretend that you're an idiot like your friends, because it's much more important to be with your friends than it is to actually be yourself. What's nice about online in the early days when it was very anonymous is you could be as smart as you wanted to be, and only the teacher and you would know that. And you could be as dumb as you wanted to be when you were with your friends. Now, this begins to change, but then this is also a thing that if you have, this is sort of an argument for opportunities for students to take courses with students from other schools and other institutions, is that again, it gives them an opportunity to reinvent their personality with students that they're not having to live with in their day-to-day lives. So there are opportunities there. This is not going to solve the problem across the board, but it can be a way for students to pursue something at a higher level of seriousness than they perhaps want to expose themselves to their friends as pursuing. But the sort of the deeper problem there is a cultural problem, and cultural problems tend to be immune to solution. So good luck.
Can I just, one question, sir.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question, sir?
Yeah.
I can see a very interesting slide out here, and this is something related to our school. We just started the STEM learning in a school last month.
Yeah.
And I see here in the slide, the preference is STEAM instead of STEM. Your thoughts on it, on a new endeavor?
So, I mean, STEM was such a nice acronym. And then the problem was always, okay, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But that's so, I mean, what are we going to do about design? What are we going to do about more creative solutions to things? Because design thinking at the same time becomes this growing thing, and how do we get design factored in here? And, you know, STEAM in some sense is the acronym solution, where it's like, oh, we'll add an A for art and change a good word to another good word. You know, more seriously, the creativity, the sort of non-linear, non-lateral, or sort of non-linear lateral thinking that leads to the ability to create new products as opposed to sort of replicate and make minor changes to existing products. That kind of creativity requires more than just the narrow focus on executing the fundamental science and the fundamental engineering. You need to have access to the world of ideas and to know how to articulate your ideas. And so to the extent that the design thinking component, the arts, the sort of classic, you know, English language is less important than just the sort of verbal expression of things. It cannot all just be quantitative. I mean, and towards this end, at the online high school, we had done a course called The History of Science and Culture, where we looked at sort of progression of science from early days. So ancient Chinese, ancient Indian, ancient Greek science traditions, and experiments and observations that were being done there. And part of what was wonderful about this was, here's a science course that isn't mathematical. And so normally, the kids who think they're good at science are the ones who happen to be good at math, and they have a quantitative ease, and they embrace this. Now, here was a science course that required kids who could read and who could reason through the written descriptions of things. And we got a very different result in who found this course compelling and who did well. And it took a lot of kids, it sort of helped kids who didn't think that they were naturally good at science to actually show an interest in it. And then the sort of the flip side we had was a course on sort of British liberal tradition and analytic philosophy, where the students who were very quantitative suddenly found a style of writing that was much more like mathematical proof than it was like creative writing. And they found this very compelling. And so this was something that would shake students out of their preconceptions of whether they were more verbal or more quantitative and give them a more holistic view of things. So I think that there are ways of being playful with these traditional boundaries and getting students to stop thinking that the universe is carved up nicely into the subjects that they study in school, but that it is a much messier thing. And if they don't conform nicely to the subjects, that's not their fault. That's just the fact that the way we've cut things up doesn't fit well. Ways to improve teachers. I mean, so why should you care about any of this? So one of the reasons is there are a lot of people out there who are worried about this. And whether the conversations I've had at Andover, with Commonwealth School, when I was talking to Eton in the UK last spring, there is this sense that the tide is changing and that with the technology, we don't know where things are going to land. And you can either get out in front of this kind of technological shift and have some say in where it's going to go, or you can sit back and wind up being washed over by the tide when it breaks. So there really is a time to step up and to look for the ways of having an impact. And those really come down to finding partners to work with, whether they are industry partners who can become strategic partners that can help you think through what you want to achieve, and that can help you achieve it sort of at an arm's length. And it is always good initially when you're doing something different to keep it at arm's length so that if it's successful, you can embrace it. And if it is a failure, you can cut the arm off and still live. And then to collaborate, to find other institutions and collectively, and then often with the strategic partner, take these steps to bring in things that can really have an impact and really help position you to move things forward. The point that I would stress if you're worried about college placement, being good is not enough. And in some sense, the students who go to very good schools have a disadvantage because it is much more impressive to be successful in spite of your conditions than because of your conditions. I mean, if you go to a good school and you do reasonably well, well, of course you did reasonably well. You were a smart kid and you went to a good school. That doesn't tell me anything. I mean, if you really want to show a difference, you need to figure out how to do more, how to really push things along.
Yeah, I would like the second point. It gives me a feeling like this is more like an extension to what we called as homeschooling earlier. And we also called as, the night school, where the disadvantaged children, and they couldn't go to school because of work and environment and various reasons. So this, it's more because of technology and advancement that now this is, the children are given a chance to go with the brand, as well as it gives a more color to homeschooling and...
Yeah, I mean, these sorts of technologies make it increasingly easy for parents to choose to make non-standard choices. And this is where it's really important as a school to not just look at outsourcing components of your curriculum to third parties. Because if parents see you as outsourcing your responsibilities, then they'll just start doing it themselves. And they'll think, why am I even going to this school if they're just bringing in outside vendors to deliver services? That's why it can't just be vendor relationships. It has to be strategic partnerships. It has to be that we're a school and we're working with this company and we're working with these other schools as a way of amplifying what we're doing. This is our mission, is to educate with the technology, we can now educate more students better in more compelling ways.
Yeah, actually, there's not much of a debate in terms of what school is good, but the idea of the pilot, assume that if at all there's some pilots being done in the Asian countries, understanding the present school system with whichever country, for example, India, you will have a lot of challenges when it comes to enabling technology and then bringing this model. I mean, are you working around something like that where there is some pilot done where schools can, start working on a kind of a semi-integrated model which can actually start doing online vis-a-vis whatever they're doing in the school and creates a blend of both to come together and then slowly migrate it.
That's a very specific question. You want concrete examples, so we'll take that offline.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, since we are running out of time. So one of the things to think about when you're looking at students, is, and certainly when universities are looking at students, when looking at students for summer programs, you can think of the 2x2 of, in the y-axis, how much do they know? In the x-axis, how fast do they learn? Parents are very good at, the tiger mother of literature is very good at, no matter how slow their student learns, if they hammer them hard enough, they can get their achievement very high. At some point, though, these kids will find themselves in a situation where the teaching now expects they all are learning quickly. And because you don't have 25 hours a night to work on your homework when you're at college, those students will crash and burn. It is really important to make sure that you're not just sort of maximizing what they know, but that you're attending to these questions of how fast they're learning. And, in some sense, learning velocity, the ability to learn quickly. And the question is, as a school, what are you doing to not just help students to realize their potential, but to help students to expand their potential, to really pull things over? And that's the thing that is much harder to do. But it's a thing that is important to pay attention to. The other question to ask yourselves as schools is, and this is important when you're beginning to look at collaboration with strategic partners or with other institutions, is really identifying sort of what is the indelible mark that you leave on your students. When you send your students into the world, you want them to have some set of characters that really constitute the core of your education, so that you can imagine somebody who's working with this kid says, did you go to that school? And that it really stands out. Because if you can find other schools that share this sense of sort of what the mark is, of the deep, indelible set of values in terms of an education from this school really means this. I mean, those are schools that then become very easy to work for. Working with somebody who has a different mission or a fundamentally different outlook, that is nothing but a recipe for a nightmare. You need to find schools that are tightly aligned on mission. And then coming together around the mission really lets you amplify your voices. I mean, there's a lot that can be said for building strategic partnerships and why building a collaborative of schools gives you a louder voice and lets you go much further. We'll have to view that as something to talk about downstream. But again, it's just, this point of engage the world, work with each other, collectively work with strategic partners. For students, getting them to do things that are generating meaningful signal. And so not just their studies, but to the extent that you can have them involved in things like outside competitions, have them involved in things that have international benchmarks, so that when they're doing things that are successful, when they're achieving, that these achievements aren't just something that is understood locally, but that is something that is easily understandable by anyone looking at them. Getting that success on the wider playing field, getting those experiences where they've gone overseas to programs or they've been online in courses with students overseas and they've done well. For the teachers, this relentless professional development, and again, focusing on the craft of teaching, which is something that is much easier to improve than fundamental subject matter knowledge. Getting them effective in the tools that address their deficits. And then find ways for the teachers to demonstrate signals to the extent that there are opportunity for badges or micro-certifications. Again, you know, a natural thing for education publications, such as the one sponsoring this event, to venture into, are these sorts of external third-party reviews of teacher background and performance and awarding of badges or other micro-certifications, so that this becomes both something that the teachers can brag about and carry with them, but that you as an institution can point to, having large numbers of teachers who have been certified as capable in this or that or the other sort of thing. You know, and then the institutions are fundamentally their students and their teachers. If you can raise the quality and the signal there, that is what's going to help the institution shine. So it's time to get moving. And I guess we're over time to get moving. The hope is that there will be a series of webinars that will go into these points in far greater detail, with far greater focus on immediate practical steps that can be taken to start moving things forward. It's easy to talk about the theory of what needs to be done, but then taking that into concrete action plans, you know, that's a different kind of conversation, but that's a good conversation to have with people sitting around the table who really are ready to talk about what are immediate next steps to achieve action. So hit Bhavin up with whatever you would like to see. And then if you want to reach either of us, there's email. And Shivram promises that things sent to info@edfinity will be stripped of whoever sent them. So anonymous complaints, praise, criticism, your short stories, that unpublished novel, you can send it to there and it will be distributed with your name removed.
Right. I do have one administrative announcement to make. Registered attendees are requested to pick up their certificates from the registration desk. Is that right, Sumya? The registration desk. So.
And I'll be around all day, so if we didn't have, so if you have questions that you didn't get to ask, or that you want, anything you want to talk about, please. I'm here for that purpose.
So can we take it offline? Can we step down and sort of conclude this? Please walk up and then we can
Yeah, just come
chat.
up and we can take it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful talk.
My pleasure.
Thank you.